Let me ask you something. Are you truly protecting your business from the inside out? Because let me tell you, the biggest threat to your organization isn't always a hacker in a hoodie from halfway around the world. Sometimes it's the person sitting right next to you, the one with access to your most sensitive data. And what if the information that they presented to you on their interview wasn't quite true, and maybe their CV was a work of fiction? Today we're looking at Annex A 6.1 screening. Just keep in mind that this isn't just about paperwork, this is about protecting your business at its core. Because who you let in and what they know and what they do can be the difference between thriving and a real crisis and a disaster for you. So what does Annex A 6.1 actually state? Well, it states that background verification checks on all candidates to become personnel shall be carried out prior to joining the organisation and on an ongoing basis, taking into consideration applicable laws and regulations, and be proportional to the business requirements, the classification of the information to be accessed, and the perceived risks. Now, there's a lot to this particular control. So I'm going to leave it on screen just for a few moments longer because I want you just to really pick out some key words in here. It's about, well, first and foremost, it talks about these verification checks being conducted prior to someone joining your organization and on an ongoing basis. But that's about thinking about this. So that's about taking this control into two parts. What do you do before someone joins? What do you do once they're employed by you? But very importantly, it's all about perceived risks. You see, under this particular control, you're expected to carry out those checks before someone joins and indeed once they're in your organization. But it has to be proportionate to you. If you are a law firm, then you will want to do those verification checks, not just when someone joins to make sure that they have the legal documentation in place that they can practice law, but you're going to want to make sure that they're maintaining those certificates on an ongoing basis. That's going to be completely different if you're a web design organization where you're really only looking at someone's credentials and capabilities and knowledge and experience before they joined you. So it's going to be different. So that's a really key thing I want you to take away from this. It's not a one size fits all. As we know, Annex A controls should never be a one size fits all. That it's all about proportionality. And in this particular control, it actually does make use of that word, that it is proportional to the business requirements. So why is this needed? Well, I think it should be relatively evident, self-evident and obvious that people are your most valuable asset. And we all know what the effect of a, let's call them a bad apple, not a bad actor, but a bad apple in any organization, in any club, in any member of the family. We know what impact that can have on your morale. But imagine you're a law firm and you hire a new senior partner. They have all the right credentials. They have a stellar CV with great references. You hire them, but you don't do the verification checks, their reference checks. So what happens when, say, a few months in and that partner makes a costly mistake? And you hear they were recently suspended from another practice for a very similar event. Turns out the information on that CV wasn't actually true. It was a work of fiction. Had you done that background check, have you reviewed the professional licenses and had you followed up on references, you might have prevented them walking through the front door. Those red flags might have been waving way before that person sat at a desk and therefore cost you time and money and had an impact upon your reputation and had an impact upon your team. Now, let's say you're operating in the finance sector. You hire a CFO, a chief financial officer, without performing credit checks. What happens if they have a massive debt that they're trying to hide? What if then they are vulnerable to coercion, bribery, blackmail, or downright fraud? By not knowing this information, you're opening your company to potential financial risks, compliance risks, and, as I said, even outright theft. And it's not just about criminal records or credit history. It's also about values and ethics. Let's say you hire someone within your social media team or within your IT function, and you don't check their online presence. What if they're posting offensive content, engaging in hate speech, or endorsing competitor products? Now, we all know that the right to freedom of speech is an interesting and complex area, but is that a risk you're willing to take? Is it someone you want within your organization? Because it could lead to a damage of your brand, it could alienate your customers, and it could create toxic work environments. These aren't just hypothetical situations. We've seen them firsthand. The price you pay for not screening your people could be extremely high. Fines, irreplaceable or irreparable reputational damage with clients, and therefore financial costs, and even team morale, which leads to poor performance and further damage to your business or firm. So what is the auditor going to be looking for? Well, the auditors aren't just looking for a simple checklist. They're not just looking for a tick that says, yes, we do screening. They're verifying that a screening process exists and that you are consistently performing those checks. So they're going to be looking for instance, policies outlining the kinds of background checks and screening that you are conducting. And those policies may talk about the fact that screening is a routine action that you perform on a annual basis. You might have a policy that says anybody of a board level will be screened every year or every 2 years, but everyone else will be screened every 3 years. Remember, proportionality. If it's right for you, then it's right for you. The auditor can't dictate how often you do those, but it has to be down to the perceived risks. The auditor is going to want to see things like contracts of employment, agreements with contractors. What kind of screening will you perform on consultants or contractors who are coming into your organization, who equally have access to systems and to data? The auditor is going to want to see that you are following up on references, that the reference checks have been requested and that they've been followed up if they're not received. And what action you take if something does happen. If you have a reference that comes back that is negative, or if it misaligns with what a person says. So maybe a reference says that this person works at this organization for 4 years, 5 years. Well, what happens if the reference comes back and says this person only worked there for 6 months? Again, the decision is yours, but you need to have some form of decision-making process. They're also going to want to see that you're checking up on qualifications, if it's appropriate. If, for instance, you're working in the financial sector, or if you're working, especially if you're working in legal or in health, they're going to want to see that you are not just qualified to practice, but you're also maintaining those qualifications. So that's where maybe your annual checks on qualifications and screening takes place. Totally up to you, depends upon the sector you're from. They're going to want to see things like one-to-one data and information about those red flags. You know, what's coming through, what do you through the screening process, because again, the screening process, the interview is the screening process. You're screening to see if this person is somebody who should be coming into your organization. So do you keep minutes and notes of any interviews conducted? Just remember that the more evidence you can provide and the more you can prepare to meet these criteria, the better. So what do you need to do? Well, if you're a small organization, or if you're auditing an organization that has 27,001 in place, you want to first of all see if you have a pre-screening process and maybe an onboarding process. Maybe there is a process for ongoing reviews. How is screening conducted? So go and speak to your HR team. Go and speak to the legal team. Ask what checks are being carried out. Are you doing age verification checks? Are you doing background employment checks? Are you doing qualification checks? Are you doing personal and professional references? Again, it has to be proportional to you. 27,001 isn't dictating that you have to do all of these things, but you do if you're operating certainly within the UK, and I'm going to dare I say globally, age verifications at the most basic level. Is this person eligible to work? Are they eligible to work in your organization, in your sector? You have to do those kind of checks. You need to make sure that you're gathering this information as well in a very secure way. So when you're auditing this, or you're speaking to your HR function, ask them, how are they collecting this information? I remember working with one particular organization some time ago. When I audited them on this particular process, Annex A 6.1 screening, they explained this to me. They said, when someone comes for an interview, Gary, what happens is we will ask for a proof of identification, usually a passport or a driving license or proof of address in the UK, usually a bank statement, because that's how we can check that this person is of an eligible age. So I sat there for a moment and I said, hang on a minute. So when someone comes for an interview, you ask them to bring this information. That's right, Gary, that's what we do. Great. Do you take a copy of that information by any chance? Yes, Gary, we do. They were very proud of this fact, and we keep that information on file. Now, I don't know if you're ahead of me here. Anyone else spot the risk? Anyone else see the problem here? Because it seemed to come as a surprise to this individual when I said to them, but hang on, if 10 people come for an interview, you take 10 copies of passports, 10 driving licenses, and 10 bank statements information, and you take a photocopy of this and you store it electronically. Is that right? Yes, Gary, that's exactly what we do. Okay. But presumably only one person gets the job. If that's the case, then aren't you storing 9 people's passports, driving license, and bank statements for no reason at all? At that point, the blood drained from their face, and they kind of caught up and said, yeah, actually, that's a really good point. When I inquired a little further, turns out this person had worked in this organization for about 5 years, and they had always done it that way. So they were potentially storing hundreds of driving licenses and passports of information, and information of people that they had no right to store that information. That information should have been destroyed instantly, or if the person wanted to verify that person's ID when they came for an interview, at least don't take a copy of the information, just get them to wave it in front of you, and you could verify by looking at it. And you could tick a box that says, yes, I verify that the passport was shown, and yes, I verify the person on the passport is indeed the person sat in front of me. You didn't need to take a copy of that information. So keep in mind, like everything that we do here, that by putting in a process, you may introduce additional risks, but it's always worth checking. Just remember, I think the key thing here is that this doesn't need to be performed completely alone. You're working with HR, you're working with specialized functions, and that probably is HR, but it could also be the legal team. And it's all about giving you the confidence that the right and proper procedures are being followed. And this helps create a transparent organization, and an organization who have the right people in the right seats who are going to help you move forward. See, screening isn't about invading privacy. It's about protecting your livelihood, your organization. It's about fostering a culture of trust, transparency, and, dare I say it, resilience. It's about making sure that the greatest investment you make in your business, i.e., your people, are also your greatest strength and not your greatest vulnerability. I hope that's been useful. Now, if you're ready to take some proactive steps towards building a more secure and robust foundation for your business, just remember that that's what we're here to do. Consultants like us, we take security and make it human, and we turn compliance from complexity into simplicity. Our tag phrase is compliance without complexity. So I hope that's been helpful. If you did find it useful, please give it a like, give it a share, and I'd love to hear your comments. If you didn't find it useful, equally, give it a like, give it a share, give me some comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Until next time, thank you very much, and see you then. Bye bye.